and I'll be presiding over this meeting. Welcome to our first Zoom meeting. Commissioners, if you all open your mics, please. Melissa, will you please conduct the roll call?
Yes, sir. Chair Hyatt.
Here.
Vice Chair Hogan.
Here.
Commissioner Faulkner.
Here.
Commissioner Clow.
Here.
Commissioner Garcia.
Presente.
Commissioner Gutierrez.
Here.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Here.
Commissioner Satania.
Here.
Mr. Chair, a quorum is present.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item is the approval of the agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, there is one change that Mr. Burke pointed out to us earlier today, and that is that the minutes of February 6 should really be February 7. If you will make that change on your agenda, are there any other changes to the agenda from staff?
Mr. Chair, there's no changes. Thank you.
Are there any changes from the commissioners?
Commissioner Faulkner, motion to approve is amended.
There a second? Who is that?
Hogan, seconds.
All right. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye in a roll call. Please, Melissa.
Yes. Commissioner Clow.
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner.
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia.
Yes.
Commissioner Gutierrez.
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Yes.
Commissioner Satania.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion has been approved.
All right, the agenda as amended is approved. Next is the approval of minutes. We'll take, unless somebody objects, all the minutes together, February 6, 2020, February 20, 2020, and March 5th, 2020. Are there any corrections to those minutes from the staff?
Mr. Chair, there's no corrections. Thank you.
Are there any corrections from you can take the agenda down off my screen. So yeah, are there any corrections from the commissioners?
Motion to approve, Commissioner Faulkner.
Commissioner Klaus, second.
All in favor signify by saying aye in a roll call, please.
Commissioner Clow.
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner.
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia.
Yes.
Commissioner Gutierrez.
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Yes.
Commissioner Satania.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion has been approved.
All right, the minutes of February 6th, February 20, and March 5th are all approved. There are no findings or conclusions for us to consider. And next is old business, and we have none. Next is new business. We'll proceed to case 2019-1325, which is 4075, 4085 Cerrillos Road, the Staybridge Development Plan. Mr. Logsdon, you have the floor, sir.
Have we confirmed that the applicant is present? I just want to make sure.
And I should unmute.
Mr. Chair, the applicant is present.
And we can promote Mr. Siebert to a panelist, I think, at any time.
All right.
So I'll go ahead. So case 2019-1325 is once again 4075 and 4085 Cerrillos Road, Staybridge Hotel Development Plan. Jim Siebert and Associates is representing Plaza Camino Real, New Mexico LLC as the owner, requesting preliminary and final development plan approval to build a 81,822 square foot extended stay hotel. Properties 3.25 acres and is zoned C2. The second part of this case is a variance requesting a variance to subsection 14.810G7D to exceed the maximum wall sign height of 20 feet. So again, it's a preliminary and final development plan. It's a 100-room, 3-story hotel. I won't say too much. I'll let the applicant present on that. The development plan is required because over 30,000 square feet in any zone in the city requires a development plan. And what he's asking for on the variance is to raise the height. The height normally max in a C2 zone is 25 feet, and he is asking for 45 feet. He's not asking for any other exceptions to the signage. He'll have a total of 3 signs which are allowed. The others will all meet square footage. He's not increasing the size of it. It is purely the height. And as you see in the staff report, that's based on positioning from Cerrillos, wayfinding, visibility, and so forth. Always chagrins me to do this. I need to point out a couple of errors. In the scramble of doing packets purely electronically, emailing and so forth, pages 70 through 78 in your packet are basically doubled up. You can kind of ignore those. That was a few pages that I didn't get deleted. The development plan starts on page 79. There is a small error in the findings I found kind of at the last second. The square footage in your findings says 88,822. Once again, that should be 81,822. And I'll let Sally, when the time comes, if it comes, decide how to handle that, or maybe mentioning that is enough. And then finally, on page 5 of this report, which I wrote some 5 months ago originally, I still incorrectly reference the sewer line direction. Jim will address this in his presentation. So those are just some minor things there. Staff is approving or is recommending approval of the variance request for the reasons outlined in your staff report. And we are recommending approval of the development plan with the conditions of approval and technical corrections outlined in the report. 3 motions would be required. They're written down, so I won't read them word for word, but one is to approve or deny the variance for 2019-1326, to approve or deny the development plan for case 2019-1325, and to approve or deny the findings of fact and conclusions of the law that have been provided for you. And I will leave my presentation at that. Stand for questions or move on.
Thank you, Lee. Commissioners, I apologize. I forgot to tell you that this afternoon I was contacted by Jeff Branch by telephone, and Jeff and I are acquaintances and have other issues. And Mr. Branch, in an ex-parte discussion with me, started by talking about a tierra contenta matter. Secondly, he began to talk about a matter in Los Solares, and then asked about the commission meeting tonight. And then he started to discuss this case, and he began to talk about a substantive issue. And I immediately referred him to Lee. And to my knowledge, he called Lee, and that was the end of our conversation. The entire conversation was probably 4 minutes, and I don't believe that that conversation will have any bearing on my ability to chair this meeting or decide if I'm required to help with this case. I also informed Sally of all of that, so that's my statement. Unless any of the commissioners have an objection, I'll continue on. I'll wait to see if you raise your hands. No hands are raised. All right. Mr. Siebert, you have the floor, sir.
Can you hear me? I don't know if I'm unmuted or not.
You are, sir. I can hear you well.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Siebert, I will need to swear you in, sir. Please
Yes.
raise your right hand. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is James Siebert. My address is my business address is 915 Mercer, Santa Fe.
Go ahead, Jim.
Let me say, first of all, that Carl Sommer is here as well, who is the attorney for the owner of the property, who is Plaza Real, Camino Real LLC. What I'll do is just go through a few quick exhibits, and then it will stand for questions. Also, Mike Gomez, who is the engineer for the property, is on the Zoom meeting as well. At least I hope he is. So let's start with some of the exhibits. This is a photo of the site, and we'll kind of start give you an idea of what's around, what's in the area of the hotel site. To the right is San Isidro village, where the cinema is and a lot of the restaurants are located. To the south of the hotel site is property also owned by the current owner of the hotel site. To the left of that is a self-storage unit. Above that is property that's currently vacant, but currently owned by the Santa Fe County Housing Authority. And to the north of that is the actual some of the residential units that are managed by the Santa Fe County Housing Authority. To the north is vacant land that actually is owned by Manuel Garcia that goes all the way to Rufina Street. One thing that we're trying to demonstrate by this and why the need for the variance is the distance from, in this case, from Cerrillos Road to the actual point on the building where the sign would be located. And it's approximately 900 feet from the southbound lane of Cerrillos to the hotel at site. The double line there indicates where the roads are going, and the one line on the north end is the extension of San Ignacio. San Ignacio being an existing street to the right that provides kind of a rear access to San Isidro Village. The other one that's north-south is a roadway that will eventually in the future provide access to the remainder of the property, and is actually designed and will be a public road as well. So let's go to the next one. So this is the lot split the lot line adjustment for the property, and includes the Garcia property as well, since they are part of they're dedicating land for the extension of San Ignacio. And what it does is it creates, by adjusting the lot, that's the existing lot, it creates the lot where the hotel site will sit. There is one thing I'd like to point out, and it's the hatched area. What that is the road design had to be modified. There was an issue of drainage, and we had to redirect the drainage that was going to the west and to the north, and direct it back onto this property. And so there's a temporary, what's called a temporary storage drainage easement. It's really a ponding area. And what will happen is that larger area to the south, as it develops, that will be relocated and will become part of a much larger master plan for the area that will include a master plan for the management of stormwater. This is something that's done administratively. We're running it concurrently with the application, just so the planning commission can get a better idea of the full scope of the project. Should we go to the next one? So this is the hotel site itself. And what you'll notice is that there's 2 points of access, one from the San Ignacio extension.
Sorry.
We're having,
Excuse me.
we'll get back there. Trust us.
Okay, let me zoom. Okay.
Yeah, the Zoom feature is something that's new to us. And so there's an access point on San Ignacio and an access point off the north-south road. And the reason for that is that satisfies the international fire code requirements. We've had discussions with the fire marshal on that. The other thing is that the width of the drive up, because this is a taller building in the order of 45 feet, the drive aisles have to be a minimum of 26 feet wide. So the drive aisles satisfy that requirement as well. There is ponding on the site for the management of stormwater that's created from this development. And once again, as we pointed out, south of the north-south road, there is the temporary pond that's managing stormwater that's created by the roads themselves. Can we go to the next one? Yeah, this is just, once again, to reemphasize where that stormwater is located. You can get a better picture here that how it relates to the north-south roadway. The other thing is in the, as you leave the site to the left, there's a line with S on it. S stands for sewer. And what's been worked out with the County Housing Authority is that we can use that land, an easement on the land for the extension of sewer, and if it's required for the extension of water as well. It would be a 50-foot wide pedestrian easement. And the purpose for that is the County Housing Authority does not want to have people exiting onto Camino Jacobo that's already a stressed roadway that's been under design. So at some point in the future, it may happen as part of a larger kind of traffic situation. But for right now, it will remain just a pedestrian access. And there are agreements that have been entered into between the owner of the property and the Santa Fe County Housing Authority to in order to acquire the easement. The easement at this point has not been acquired. It would require action by the Board of County Commissioners. And we will be working on that prior to recordation of the development plan. Should we do the next one? Is there a next one? I can't remember.
Yes.
Oh, it's the elevations, yeah. Can you get maybe a little bigger?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Let's just, you know, this scrolling is slow. What did we talk about? Okay, let's just get bigger.
This one slides it over.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I just have to do this, but it's oh, here we go again. Okay.
This is rather touchy is what it is.
That's not the one. Okay, thanks. Okay.
All right, we'll leave it at that scale, sorry. So the top facade is the facade that faces San Ignacio. And it's the facade also that has the sign variance. And the variance is not for the size of the sign. The size is in conformance with the requirements of the code. It is 50 square feet. But we're raising it up so that there is more visibility as somebody approaches the San Isidro Village and is obscured by other buildings, they have a better chance of seeing the sign. And for that reason, it's on the far right-hand corner. The elevation below is the north elevation. It would be facing towards Rufina Street. No sign on that elevation. And we're back to that. Let's go to the next one. And then this is the west elevation that faced toward the county housing property. And the south elevation is the one that faces towards Cerrillos. And once again, it's the one that has the sign on it and where the variance from the height limit is requested. The variance is from 25 feet to 40 feet, which puts it pretty near the top of the building. Once again, in order to enhance the observation of the sign and the hotel from Cerrillos Road. So with that, we'll begin to answer any questions that you have.
All right, Jim, is there anybody else from your team that you need to speak at this point in time?
No, that's it. We'll be available for questions.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the opportunity for the public hearing in this matter. Those of you that wish to testify in this matter, please indicate by raising your hand. Is that what we're doing now, Noah? Or are you moving those people from attendees to panelists?
Yes, Chair. It appears that right now we have 4 hands raised. We have John Padilla, Jeffery Branch, Freda Burns, and Joseph Montoya.
All right.
If I might add, apologies, Chair Hyatt. I just want to state, I do see that we have one phone-in listener, and phone-in listeners can't press a raise hand button if they're on like a landline, but you should be able to use a *9 function to raise a virtual hand that we can see. So if we have any call-in listeners, I just want to mention that. Thank you. Sorry.
*9. All right. Each of you that are going to testify, what's that? That's feedback. Okay. You'll have to be sworn each time, so we'll take you one at a time. No, I'm going to look at the panelists. And do you want to call them, or do you want me to?
Mr. Chair, I'll allow the first person in attendance who would like to talk was Mr. John Padilla. So I'm going to unmute him right now and allow him to talk.
Right.
First, he'll have to be sworn in.
Let me also remind everybody that you'll have 3 minutes to talk. Noah will keep the time, or somebody else will. Who's going to do it?
I will keep the time, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Oh, I
So
thought you wanted me.
Okay, yeah. The city attorney Paez will be able to.
All right, so that when you get to the end of your time, there'll be some kind of notification. If you wrap it up, I'll try to be lenient and let you finish sentences, but not paragraphs. All right.
It'll be me saying time.
Oh, okay. It's pretty technological.
I know. I'm sorry. The buzzer apparently isn't very audible compared to
All right.
me. So.
All right, Mr. Padilla.
Mr. Padilla, please raise your right hand. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, and I hope you can hear me.
We
Yes,
do.
we can. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is John Padilla, 2301 Camino Artista here in Santa Fe. Mr. Burke, I would like Freda to be able to speak first, if we could do that, and I would follow behind her, please.
Okay, that's fine if the chair approves that.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to go ahead and elevate Freda to be able to talk, and please wait Freda to be sworn in. Thank you.
Please unmute your microphone, Ms. Burns. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Freda Burns, 1660A Old Pecos Trail,
Thank
Santa
you.
Fe.
Go ahead, Ms. Burns.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioners, for allowing us the opportunity to speak this evening. I am here on behalf of the estate of Alfredo Garcia, which, as Mr. Siebert pointed out during his presentation, owns the property to the north of the property that is at issue here today. As was also pointed out by Mr. Siebert, there are really two cases that are at issue here tonight involving this property. There's the Staybridge development and the Staybridge variance. Now, the Staybridge development really has two parts to it. It's the development itself, and then it's also the extension of the San Ignacio Road. It's our position, commissioners, that these probably should have been 3 cases, because as you'll see, the extension of San Ignacio Road involves the interests of quite a few parties, but regardless, it is what it is. We're here to be clear. The estate does not oppose. We have no problem with the development itself or the variance. We are here tonight to address only the submittals with regards to the extension of San Ignacio Road. Now, that extension, as you saw, runs between my client's property and the subject property. Not only is that extension going to greatly impact my client's property with regards to issues like drainage, future development, but it does in fact require a dedication of a portion of my client's property in order to effectuate that extension. So for those reasons, we believe that my client's issues here as a landowner and on whose property this road is going to be in addition to serve should be addressed as part of the approval of this extension. And so far in this process, they have not been. Even as Siebert said during his presentation, we are part of this development because of the San Ignacio Road extension. But we have material concerns that we believe have not been addressed in the planning process. To give the commissioners a little more background, my client actually has a contract with PCR, the applicant here, to cooperate in the development of San Ignacio Road for the very reasons I've stated, not only because it serves my client's property, but also because it will require a dedication. To date, we have done everything in our power to try to resolve the issues that we are bringing to the commissioners tonight between ourselves and PCR, but unfortunately, it's our position that they have failed or refused to cooperate, and so here we are.
And that's time.
Okay, I'm finishing up. We understand it's not the role of the Planning Commission to get involved in that dispute. All we're asking is that the Planning Commission hears our concerns. We do not object to the San Ignacio Road extension, but we do have concerns that we would ask be made conditions of any approval. So now I will turn it over to John Padilla, who is representing the Garcia estate as well to address those issues.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Mr. Padilla?
Mr. Burke, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, thank you very much for this opportunity to present to you this evening. There was a letter submitted to Lee and city staff this afternoon. I understand it's not able to be submitted as part of your packet, but I would like to reference that letter dated May 7th, 2020 as my review of the items from the submittal dated March 2020 for this application. Specifically, as mentioned by Freda, is the review of the San Ignacio Road improvements. There are some general comments that I'd like to make and then specific comments. So what we'd like to do is to make sure that the San Ignacio Road extension should be considered for extension west to Camino Jacobo. And then finally should be considered extending west to Lopez Lane to be able to provide through traffic for future developments. It's something that should be considered. The public water design should be completely addressed to coordinate the possible water extension onto the Garcia estate property. The final engineering review, what we would request is that the Garcia family estate be allowed to review that information prior to final development plan approval and recordation. the Garcia family estate should also be allowed to coordinate a driveway cut location at their southeast portion of their property off of the expanded or the extension of the San Ignacio Road that will be a part of this that's part of, excuse me, part of this application. There's some general comments there. Then in reference to the roads, we really feel that in looking at the information that was provided, that it should require a full drainage report and drainage design to make sure that, or to ensure that the San Ignacio Road drainage does not negatively affect the Garcia property. In the packet, typically we see a report from the engineering division director. In the report, in the packet, there is not a report, at least the packet we were provided, there is not a report from John Romero, the city engineer, commenting on the road development and any questions that he may have in reference to the expansion of the extension of San Ignacio Road. The landscape plan that was provided in the packet we received in the development plan sheet 15, in the road extension plan sheet 9, still indicates a previous plan on the original submittal that shows encroachments not only onto the Garcia estate, but also, thank you, our Garcia estate, but also onto the land to the west. So there's a number of items there. I'd ask that you take a look at that letter submitted. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla. Mr. Burke, who's next?
Mr. Chair, Jeffery Branch is next. I would going to allow him to talk, and please have him sworn in. Thank you.
Mr. Branch, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Please state your full name and address for the record.
Jeffery Branch, P.O. Box 2328, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87504.
Thank you.
The floor is yours, Mr. Branch.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, thank you for allowing me to speak here real quick. I'm the owner of the San Isidro Plaza next door. We developed that, back in 2004 to 2006. Know Mr. Salem, who's the current owner of the property, and obviously the Garcia family. I'm not opposed to the project. I wish we had had the opportunity to work together to create a little bit better master plan, so that there was more pedestrian connection, more vehicular connection, so that it was congruent as opposed to just plotting it on a separate piece of property. But here we are. So I'm not opposed to the project. I concur with what Freda and John said on their comments. The one thing that concerns me a little bit is the traffic impact study that was presented. We built, when I built San Isidro, we built Zaffarano Road with our money. We also built San Ignacio with our money, and also provided impact fees at that time. So it was a little bit of overkill, but we provided all of that. We know that Zaffarano's challenged in terms of traffic right now and may need some future improvements, but we paid for all that. The traffic impact study, I'm told, and Greg Gonzales might be, who works with me, may be on the Zoom call as well. Apparently, 25% of the traffic, and I don't know if I can share a screen or not, but 25% of the traffic is indicated to come through our property, right between Burger King and Regal Theaters. That driveway is not a public thoroughfare, and we have no agreement with the ownership to use that to access their property. There's no easements to San Ignacio. That is not a public thoroughway. We could put up a curb at San Ignacio if we chose to right now. Not that we would, but until we have an agreement with maintenance sharing and that type of thing, so that we're not burdened by other people's traffic without any kind of support, it's not something that we're excited about. I'm not sure for a fact, but I understand there may be a water easement that's shown on the plans that we have not granted. There was one discussion with Mr. Siebert and Greg, and then there was no follow-up from that point. So again, we're not opposed to the project, but I think there's some representations that are made on this preliminary and final development plan that are not completely congruent with regards to final approvals. So, I think it's a good opportunity for the neighborhood, but again, I think there would have been a better opportunity had we had better discussions, and it could have been for a better regional plan for the area. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Noah, who's next?
Mr. Chair, Joseph Montoya from the County of Santa Fe would like to speak.
Okay.
Please unmute your microphone. Thank you. Mr. Montoya, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name, full name, and address for the record.
My name is Joseph Montoya. I am 4 Mimosa Road, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Thank you.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, thank you very much for allowing us to speak in front of you today. We've had some very healthy conversations with both the adjacent landowners and and representatives, both the legal, planning, and engineering representatives of the Staybridge Hotel development. We don't have any concerns about the engineering that has been done. We did come to an agreement in principle today with legal representatives of the development in terms of access to an easement. As was mentioned earlier, that won't be finalized, of course, until the Santa Fe County Commission actually approves it. However, we do have what I would say a gentleman's agreement in terms of the ability to get an easement to a sewer line I had just put in last year, actually. And so we feel confident about moving forward with this development as it is. When we appreciate the amount of dialogue that has gone on, we do hope for actually more extended dialogue, as Mr. Branch had mentioned, in terms of really looking at this full development in the full area, including with the adjacent landowners. So we're looking forward to those possibilities. I did just want to take this opportunity to mention that we won a HUD Affordable Housing Award just a few months ago. We've had students from across the nation participate in a design charrette for our properties. And we would ask you, just for fun, to be able to look at those designs. They're on our website. And so we'd appreciate your commentary, because we were really impressed with some of what the students had provided. And just want to say thank you very much for allowing us to speak for you from today.
Thank you, Joseph, and thanks for all your good work on behalf of affordable housing at the county.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate it. It's good to see you.
Good to be seen at my age. Noah, I see that Greg Gonzales is listed as an attendee. Greg, if you have any comments, this is the time to unmute your microphone or raise your hand. I see your hand is raised. Is that correct? Noah, do you want to?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. I will allow him to talk after, and so he can be sworn in. Also, I'd like to acknowledge that we have members of our development review team, Brian Snyder from Water, Dee Beingesser from Grading and Drainage. We also have Geronimo Griego for Fire. And then John Romero from Traffic Engineering, and Stan Holland for Wastewater. So in case there's any questions from the commission for any of those DRT members, they are in attendance.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll need to hear from John Romero and Brian, but let's finish the public hearing. Greg, please be sworn.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your full name and address for the record.
Greg Gonzales, 1 Wild West Lane, Santa Fe, 87506.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Greg.
Members of the commission, thank you very much for allowing us to speak. I will just piggyback a little bit about what Mr. Jeffery Branch said, and I would bring reference to figure number 16 in the traffic report, and that is the graphic that shows the to our understanding the trip generations that would be going into the proposed development, and it shows the 25% of the traffic entering in from Cerrillos Road through the San Isidro development, and 30% exiting to Cerrillos Road through the San Isidro development. So I would just like to, again, echo what Jeffery Branch said, that we were not notified about that traffic impact onto that private thoroughfare. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Noah, one comment on our Zoom process. While folks are testifying, if either you or Jim Siebert could bring up the screen that shows the particular area that we're talking about, that would be helpful. I know what Greg looks like. I don't need to see his picture, for example, but if you could do that. If not, I'll understand. All right, is there anybody else? I'm sorry, I lost my screen. Is there anybody else from the general public that would like to comment? I'm looking at the attendees list. I see no one with a hand raised. Is that correct, Noah?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
All right. Commissioners, as we discussed earlier, is there anybody that wants to address any questions to any of the people who have testified? If you do, please identify yourselves now. I see Commissioner Faulkner's hand raised. Commissioner Faulkner, go ahead.
So I have two questions. One on the variance for the sign. Do the buildings from San Isidro Plaza, do they block? Would they block the sign if it was at the 25 feet? And then the second question is that portion of Zaffarano owned by the San Isidro development? And does the proposed project, would they have to seek permission to use that road?
Either Lee or Mr. Siebert.
I can go ahead and say, as far as the visibility of the sign, it would depend if you are if you're standing still where you would drive up San Ignacio past the theater and so forth, you have a pretty clean shot there right now, but that field is vacant at the moment. As you're driving either way on Cerrillos, that's where things get more complicated. If you're coming from the north, headed south, I consider it southwest, whatever, but heading south on Cerrillos, certainly the buildings, the theater block it for moments in time. And the overall thinking in my recommendation in the staff report was that over time, this will all fill in. And then your other point, we might pull in Romero, but Zaffarano is a public street, and so is San Ignacio running east-west. It is not a private street anymore. And John could confirm that for us maybe, but that's how it appears on our GIS system and in all the city records.
John, would you unmute, please, and answer?
I'm unmuted. Could you please repeat your question? I apologize.
Just, is Zaffarano a public street? And if so, I mean, if so, obviously there isn't a problem, but if it's privately owned, that portion of it, then there would be a problem that the developer did not consult the Regal Theater property owners.
Okay, so yes, so Zaffarano is a public street. It was dedicated to the city by the San Isidro development, as was San Ignacio, from Zaffarano to the western boundary of the San Isidro property, or the eastern boundary of the Staybridge property. Those are all public roads.
I think you're referring to the street that's in between Burger King and the movie theater. That's the one I think they're talking about. That
yeah,
on the San Isidro property.
That might be Lee right.
Okay, yeah, so for that one
portion is.
Go ahead, Lee.
Oh, I was just going to say that portion is, yeah, to make the distinction, but I believe it was said earlier that the east-west running portion of San Ignacio is private still, and that's not the case. Only the north-south running.
All right, John, anything to add?
Correct, yes. So the north-south portion of San Ignacio, I don't know if that's the name, but the portion that proceeds between the movie theater and Burger King is private. The east-west portion of San Ignacio is public. Zaffarano is public.
Okay,
And just to clarify the signage issue on the variance on the sign, so it is blocked currently by the movie theater in certain spots on Cerrillos, if the sign was to be at 25 feet. But you're anticipating that more development in that area will further block it in the future, right? Is that right, Lee?
That's essentially what I'm saying. And that also, you know, the type of building, when you look at the variance criteria, it says land use and building. And so the thinking is that wayfinding for a business like a hotel is more important. Visibility of the sign, in other words, is more important for a hotel that's kind of way back off the road compared to, say, an office building where, you know, the people go in there, work there, or apartments, you know, or future apartments. The people go in there, live there. A sign visibility isn't as critical to them as is essentially the argument.
And is that something that's addressed in the code, that specific argument?
No, not necessarily. That's what the variance criteria are designed, is to kind of, you know, basically make your argument. How do you meet the unique circumstances, which is where this one kind of mostly plays in. And that is the argument I put forward in the staff report, that, you know, the unique circumstances are both the position and the type of business, essentially, that, you know, wayfinding is important for this.
All right, that's all. Thank you.
all right. I see Commissioner Garcia and Commissioner Hogan would like to speak. Do you, either of you want to ask anything more of the public spokespeople, or can I close the public hearing? Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a question for the representatives of the Garcia property.
Was that Ms. Burns or John Padilla?
Well, either of them, whoever can answer my question, because
Ask your question, please.
they mentioned that extension of the San Ignacio road was going to require either dedication of property or giving up part of their land for easements. And I'm just wondering, either between them and or San Isidro property, is that going to cause them to lose capital, or cost them, obviously, in order to do so if this is approved?
All right. Which of you would like to respond? I don't see the.
This is Freda, Chair. I believe I can respond, and if John wants to fill in, he can. But yeah, so this would require a dedication of a portion of our property and essentially a loss of that property. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Garcia?
It does. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, if this property is to be approved, or this project is to be approved, and the extension of San Ignacio Road is gonna have to happen, then who will be financially responsible to continue that road?
So that is a question that is at issue between the estate, the Garcia estate, and the applicant. So they have a contractual obligation now, but there's an issue there with regards to cooperation. And so again, that's gonna be an issue. But you know, as we stated, the Garcia estate does not object to the extension. We just simply need to have a seat at the table with regards to issues that affect our property with that extension.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hogan.
Garcia.
Oh.
The Chair and Commissioner Garcia, John Padilla.
Yes,
If
go ahead, John.
if you look at if I might, if you look at the topo survey that is a part of the road development plan, the Garcia property is a portion of that overall dedication. And that is why we are expressing our concerns about how the communication has happened, how the development will happen, and to ensure, and granted, we've been working with this for many months now. And many items have been resolved, but there still continues to be some concerns as to that overall development. So we're a portion of that road. We're a portion of that road as it is proposed to be developed.
Thank you, John. Commissioner Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My concerns are about, or questions are about signage to the applicants, so they don't necessarily have to be part of the public
All
hearing.
right. All right. I see other hands are raised. Commissioner Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Montoya was introduced by Mr. Burke as from Santa Fe County, and I'm sorry, I either missed it or didn't get his position with the county. I'm just wondering if that can be stated so. And if he was working on official county, talking as an official for the county or as an individual.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, yes, I am officially speaking on behalf of the Santa Fe County Housing Authority and the director of the Santa Fe County Housing Authority. Now I'm also the manager for community development for the county of Santa Fe, which means I'm in charge of housing and economic development issues for the county.
Okay, so Mr. Montoya, you alluded to the fact that you have at this point a gentleman's agreement for what amounts to a sewer and pedestrian, that 50-foot pedestrian easement at this time?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, that's correct. We were able to have an agreement on terms of the points of negotiation today. We finalized that. Again, I cannot speak officially in terms of that the county approves it, as the only time that happens is when it will go through a process with the Santa Fe County Commission and they approve it. However, based on the negotiated points that we have, this is what I will be carrying through in order to provide an easement in the future.
Okay, and Mr. Montoya, is it your official position, it was stated that that's better staying a pedestrian access as opposed to Mr. Padilla alluding to that connectivity through that area and Camino de Jacobo and Lopez Lane is to the greater good? What's your position?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, for the immediate future, we would insist on a pedestrian access and a pedestrian walkway. However, if there is more and continued higher density development, both commercial and housing development, we feel it's appropriate and necessary actually to be able to punch a road through all the way to Lopez Lane. So our gentleman's agreement anticipates that possibility. We do not currently have an agreement with any of the landowners to be able to sell property, nor is there any agreement currently to be able to use eminent domain. However, if in the future that the city and the adjacent landowners feel that it's important to be able to punch that street completely through, we are in agreement with that, and we will make sure that our design does not in any way impede in terms of that possibility.
Okay, and lastly for you, Mr. Montoya, you did talk about maybe more cooperation, more planning for this area. Is there anything that really you feel need to be addressed specific to this plan for the future?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, thank you much for the question. It seems to me that it's just simply a matter of timing. We have this particular development that is ready to go forward, and it's a little faster than the rest of the applicants or the rest of the possible applicants in the area. I do believe that there is great possibilities for this specific area of town to be able to provide housing and economic opportunities and to really build a pedestrian-oriented, high development area. However, that is not what is in front of you today. And so based on what you have in front of you today, we are simply saying that we have no particular issues from an engineering standpoint with this development, and that we feel that we've planned enough to be able to allow us the flexibility to be able to encourage a higher density development with transportation linkages, both from a pedestrian standpoint and a vehicular standpoint, and or a multimodal standpoint, actually, is what we're hoping to consider. We're currently working with their transportation folks in order to allow higher density development. However, at this stage of the game and this particular approval, we feel confident in terms of the agreement, our ability to move forward with a possible agreement. And again, I do want to state that I do not have the authority to say that this is an agreement with the county until both the county manager and, of course, and the county commission has signed off on it. But we do have an agreement in principle with the adjacent landowner.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Montoya. Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to ask Mr. Branch a quick question regarding.
Just one, hang on, Brian, hang on 1 minute. Mr. Hogan, Commissioner Hogan, I have to absent myself for a second. Would you please chair for a moment?
Sure, thank you. Carry on. The question was addressed to Mr. Branch. Brian, did you want to finish that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Branch alluded to the fact that they have the opportunity or the ability to put a curb at the private easement up there. Do you also, Mr. Branch, with city approvals, have the opportunity, if this becomes a big growing area, to maybe do some kind of signage for what things that are happening in the back? And I guess that would take selling them the right or something. That's my question.
Commissioner Gutierrez, interim Chairman Hogan, now that Jack stepped out. You know, I think we're open to those discussions. You know, it's obviously not our project, so we're not reaching out to the applicant. But, you know, we always intend to be a good neighbor. I think, you know, traffic draws traffic. You know, like I said before, I'm an urban planning major from years and years ago, so I'm all about density and linkages. And the shopping center that we built in 2004 is a little bit outdated now. So we've been thinking about the future as things change, and obviously COVID is having a big impact in that. And our plan was to create more densities, to create more ability to live, work, and play. And so we would love to have seen that. But to answer your question, no, we'll cooperate. But I think you know, communication is key. So we need to be able to talk and figure out how it works for everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Branch. Mr. Chair, I would quick question for Mr. Logsdon about as alluded to earlier on the sign variance, or do you want me to wait?
No, go ahead. Wait. No, I do want to close the public hearing.
Okay.
Commissioner Garcia, is your question related to any of the people who testified? Noah, did you unmute him?
Yes, Mr. Chair, he's unmuting himself.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I have no further questions, Commissioner Chairman. Thank you.
All right. All right.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'd just like to say that staff has tried to bring as many of these parties to the table together to reach some sort of agreement, to no avail. And we've tried over many meetings with many different parties, and Mr. Logsdon has done a good job of trying to navigate that, as can be seen in his report. But I think that you know, having some of these issues which were brought to us in the last 24 hours when we've been working on this for 3 months, or potentially has been an application for 3 months, is something that I do want to discuss. And staff has brought some of these parties together, primarily the Garcias and the folks from the Staybridge property, and we have had them at the same table trying to work out whatever differences there are. And we don't get involved in legal agreements between two parties. And I want to make clear there is a legal agreement involved in this between two parties that is different than the development plan approval criteria, the variance criteria, and all the other criteria that go into grading and drainage, roads, sewer, water, as well as lot line adjustments. And so I do want to make it clear that some of the stuff that's being brought up here can be seen in some ways as partaking to a legal agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. We'll come back to that in a minute. Hearing nothing else. By the way, did you ever, let's see, the person who called, did we see a *9 at all from the person who's a call-in? I'm just trying to see if they've raised their hand.
Mr. Chair, they have not.
All right.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Brian, Commissioner Gutierrez. Before you close the public hearing, I would just like to ask Mr. Padilla a question and have staff respond.
Go ahead.
Mr. Padilla, you did allude to the fact that drainage was going to be a problem on this. Can you just real quick sum that up? And then I'd like to hear staff's response to that. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gutierrez, first of all, I want to just mention that, yes, we have been working with staff. Staff has made many efforts to coordinate conversations between ourselves and the adjoining property owner. I will acknowledge that. However, I will acknowledge the fact that, you know, the last minute items, we've also been submitting information back and forth and requesting information from staff. So there's been a cooperation and a collaborative effort to try to get some resolution here. And last minute items are not necessarily what we feel has been presented. These are comments that have been going on for over 3 months, and comments that have been presented to city staff for their review for a while now, and working with the adjoining property owners, we've been working to come to some agreement. To answer your question specifically, at one point in the original submittal, there were improvements, grading and drainage proposed off their property. There was grading and drainage on the original plan that was submitted for the original review by the Planning Commission that included development off of the property that the applicant owns. There was grading and drainage happening within the Garcia property, as well as to the property to the west that is owned by Santa Fe County. After working with the applicant, and with city acknowledging it at one meeting clearly that there was a violation of grading off of the property. The city did ask the applicant to change that after we brought that forward. The applicant has made those changes. However, the question about drainage is how drainage does happen and controlled. If you look at the drainage plan, there's actually a drop inlet on the north side of San Ignacio Road at the northwest corner of San Ignacio Road before it turns south onto the proposed San Alberto Lane. Where does that drop inlet go? That drop inlet is on the north side of the street. The only place that it can go is onto the Garcia property. So that drainage coming off San Ignacio Road, how do we control that, or why should we control it? It's not historic drainage. It's drainage that is proposed to be developed by this road improvement. That is the question that's one of the questions why we raised the point of a full drainage plan. How is drainage being controlled? Why is drainage being brought onto the Garcia state property? Mr. Gutierrez, I hope that answers your question.
All right, Noah, should we have Lee or Mr. Siebert, or who wants to respond?
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that we, if this relates to, I would let the applicant respond to some of those comments that Mr. Padilla brought forward, as well as I'd like also our city engineer, Dee Beingesser, is able to talk about the grading and drainage issues if you would like to bring that up as a topic.
All right, Mr. Siebert, you're recognized, sir.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, we have Mike Gomez, who is the engineer on the project, online. Let me bring him in and respond to Mr. Padilla's comments.
All right, would you open Mr. Gomez's microphone and would you be sworn, please?
Yes, Mr. Gomez, please raise your right hand. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your full name and address for the record.
Michael Gomez at 1599 South St. Francis Drive.
Thank you.
Can I share a screen on this thing, Noah?
Yes, you can.
Okay, okay, share screen. Okay, can you see it?
I think that's the wrong share screen that you brought up. I think you wanted to bring something different up.
Okay, so. Uh-oh, am I still on?
Yes.
I see submittals being your first tab. Maybe you just have the wrong tab.
Okay, so I'm trying to share a screen on another monitor right here. So
And Chair, I just want to acknowledge that Commissioner Clow has had her hand up.
I've seen that. Thank you.
I'm unable to go ahead and get this thing up here, Noah, unless you can give me better instructions here.
Well, I'm going to be hard pressed to let you go on, Mike. We need to move ahead. So can you describe what it is you're trying to have us see?
Yes, we've done a thorough drainage analysis of both the street and the development plan. And I have in front of me anyway, the drainage basins. And to the east of this project, there are 2 drop inlets on San Ignacio Road. Those drop inlets catch all the upstream drainage and they route it to a pond within San Isidro Village. So that water is routed towards Cerrillos Road. You may have been out near the Burger King. Behind the Burger King is a pond. That's where that water goes to. We're extending the road. It's a public road further to the west now. So we've included within our design 2 new drop inlets that drain to the south into our property and through our pond. And we've gone ahead and done the calculations. We have 0 water going into the Garcia property, 0. And at the end of the day, comparing the existing condition to our developed condition, we had 8.7 CFS exiting it in the existing condition. We've gone ahead and reduced that down to 0.3 CFS. So we have significantly reduced that drainage down from 8 to 0.3, and our drainage is going to the south to an existing swale that has always carried runoff. So so there you can see it. Great, whoever brought that up. There's the 2 drop inlets. The Garcia property is on the north of the cursor, right in there. We have curb and gutter. None of our grading is going into their property. We match up to the existing ground, and we have curb and gutter so the water cannot escape and go either to the north or to the west. It goes south through our ponds and into our detention. So we're gone way beyond the ordinance. And this is for a 100-year storm.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Dee, do you feel a need to speak, or have we heard enough? Clear issue, then I'm going to Commissioner Clow. Dee?
Commissioner Hyatt, no, I believe that I have enough information from the developer. I don't have the drainage calculations, and I have requested those. But as far as I've seen, the design looks good.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Gutierrez, we were on your questions. Are they answered now? Can we go on, sir?
Yes. I understand it. There are 2 entrances, one on San Ignacio Road, and then the other one is on another road. That's a dirt road. Is that correct, or what?
No, Commissioner, developer will be building two roads effectively here. An extension of San Ignacio that heads west. And that
Yes.
is, of course, part of what we're talking about. Part of that's on the Garcia property. And then he is building a new paved road, 50-foot right of way south there. And that one in the plan set is actually named San Alberto. So that is a paved road headed south.
And that will connect with Cerrillos, is that correct?
I'm a little
No.
unclear what that will do in the long run. Jim or John might be able to say. I'm not sure that it will.
Okay. And am I correct that this development will not occur if the San Ignacio extension does not occur, or if the other roadway is not developed? Is that correct?
Yeah, the roadway is integral to this project. The future roadway, of which there is much discussion, is not. And I want to clarify that the road design that Mr. Siebert and his group have provided us does not prevent a future extension of San Ignacio in any way.
So am I correct that in addressing the approval or disapproval of this property, we as the planning commissioner really do not need to be concerned about the roadways at this point in time? That would be something that would be addressed in the future, and that the development wouldn't happen unless the road issues get worked out.
Correct, Commissioner. The Chapter 14, both in terms of road design and construction and infrastructure general, like water and sewer, requires a person to obviously provide for, well, with the water and sewer, for instance, they have to obviously provide for what's on site and make reasonable accommodations for future connections into that water and sewer system. Likewise, with road design, we require stub roads where we think there's a high probability of a road extending in the future. So that's why San Ignacio isn't being built with a curb there. It'll have barricades for now, because the assumption is maybe it will go farther west in the future. But the developers really, or go ahead.
Is it anticipated that this extension of San Ignacio Road would be public or private?
The assumption is public.
And what about the other road that you said? What was the name of that one? The one that doesn't exist at this point in time?
Commissioner San Alberto, I believe, is what they're working with on a name, and it will be a public road, yes. So just to clarify, the road design, to summarize, I should say, the road design as proposed does enable development of the hotel site, and it also provides completely public right-of-ways that will allow for future connections.
And then the second issue, the one that was raised by Jeff Branch, is that he's concerned that the private section of San Ignacio will be used to access the property. Is that correct?
He did express that, and it's reasonable to assume that that would happen. I might have John Romero comment further on that, but I'll also point out that I'm sure that private road is absorbing a lot of traffic from the apartments to the north. There are many places in the city that have situations like that.
And
Mr. Romero, I'm sorry, do you want to ask another question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I mean, as planning commissioners, I mean, I can't see how we can really necessarily be concerned about that. I don't think there's anything we can really do with that.
Let me just see if John has anything to add.
Okay.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. So the traffic study that was being referred to did assume a portion of the traffic going through that private road. Now, the fact that it assumed it wasn't granting legal right to do so or anything like that. But some along the lines of what he was explaining, this type of situation happens throughout the city quite a bit, where part of an approved development plan, in this case being San Isidro, they were required to have an approved circulation plan, which connected from one public roadway to another. When you have that, there is a potential for people to cut through. The example Mr. Logsdon brought up about the apartment complex, that potential is, there's potential for people to cut through the middle of his development to get out to, in front of Lowe's. There's that potential all over the place. I personally don't think it's a reason to limit this development or to disapprove of this development. I do think San Isidro, they would need some kind of city approval to close any access there, because that's part of their approved development plan. So if they're to close any of that road in any way, they would have to run it by us, and we would more than likely not allow them to do so. I can definitely appreciate their concern, and as far as people using their private road, but I don't think there's a mechanism for us to prohibit that, nor any grounds for us to deny this development because of that.
And based on the fact it's private property, so we as the Planning Commission, we don't address issues dealing with private property. Okay, thank you.
All right. I don't see any other hands raised from the commissioners. Commissioners, this is our final opportunity to address questions. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I've been listening into the comment from others there, and just looking at the overall fit to the area, and again, I know that it's their right to develop. Given anything going to the future in terms of how it affects future development of the area, and how that is, again, gonna either cause any issue with neighbors or have an issue with the public in terms of their public well-being and the welfare of people traveling through that area, either through traffic or through drainage or so on and so forth. And I also have more of a comment in terms of the sign variance, because I know we're going to have to vote on that as well. In previous variances that we have denied, was also in regards to signage and height and where they were positioned. And that being said, I don't know that this is, again, a variance that I think I can approve, but given other times that we've talked about sign variances. So that being said, I don't know if any other commissioners have anything else to comment on that, but I'll stand down.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a couple of questions on the variance. Are the signs lit? Is that the intention?
Yes, Commissioner, they're backlit, as I recall. I could let Jim answer that.
Mr. Siebert.
Mr. Chair, that's correct, that they are in a box and they are backlit.
Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Hogan.
As I recall, that area has quite a bit of signage, lit signage, be it the theaters or whatever. So it does not seem to me like this is changing the character of the area. Is that, I guess is maybe a question for staff. Is that your assessment in recommending approval there?
Effectively, yeah. I don't think it's necessarily out of character with the rest of the signage in the area, other than the fact that it will be taller. On a tall building, offset, in my opinion, it's appropriate, which is why the recommendation I did. But yeah, there's a variety of signage all around the complex, some of which is visible from Cerrillos. The example I wrote in my staff report was that, like the big box store has a parking lot with a clear shot all the way to Cerrillos. So at 25 feet, that's pretty visible by comparison.
Great, thank you. That answers my question, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Faulkner.
So on the other cases that we didn't grant variances, it seems to me on the signage issue, it seems to me that the signs weren't blocked by any other buildings or any kind of thing that would impede the public's ability to see the signage. And where I see this variance a little bit differently is that likely the sign will not be seen at all. if it's at the 25 feet when development is built out, and also currently in some places it wouldn't be seen at all. Is that a correct understanding, staff? That really at 25 feet, the sign probably wouldn't be seen?
Commissioner, yeah, that's essentially my argument. I might direct you, I tried to do like a kind of 3D oblique aerial. It's in your exhibit C, maps and photos. I can figure out which page of the packet if you bear with me. And I think that lends a little bit of, the reason I've included that is I feel like it lends a little bit of perspective on that issue. So that's actually page 30 in your packet. And I don't know, I guess now on my little laptop screen, I'm not sure it lends that much perspective at all, but the thing I was trying to illustrate there is that it is set back and there are some large structures effectively in front of it at various points. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that, to answer your question very directly, yes, that is what I'm saying.
And that will continue to be the case as more development happens in that area, given the nature of the development that would happen in that area.
Yeah, it's hard to say what will happen around it, but it's all C2, which does allow up to the 45-foot height of this building, potentially. I think behind it, maybe not so much, because that's zoned mixed use, and then I believe currently fades into residential zoning, although I'm not positive, right? Well, that should be another page or two on the other side. Yeah, I think it's an assumption that there will be, 1 and 2 story buildings back there at a minimum.
Yeah, my concern is I like to try and be consistent, but it's consistent in my voting, but it seems that in the other cases, we didn't have this kind of obstruction of a sign where the height literally limited the public's ability to see the sign at some points where you would normally have the public have the ability to see a sign. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Satania?
Yeah, my question is for Lee. I'm just trying to understand, you have your interpretation of this variance and the argument that you've made to approve it, but I wanted to get your opinion on why the Chapter 14 code sets minimums of 25 feet for commercial buildings.
Commissioner, I don't know if I've been around Santa Fe long enough to know for sure, but I believe it's kind of rooted in the general kind of keep it low attitude for most things here in the city. Same way we limit colors on signs and size of them and numbers of them. If I had to guess, I would say it's kind of a remnant of kind of the general attitude here to keep things low key. However, balancing that out, what I'm arguing is that this is a zone that allows, 45 feet. Generally, at 25 feet, a sign is near the top of a typical smaller, commercial building or even a big box. And so, perhaps whenever C2 allowed that height, we should have taken a look at the sign code. I'm not making a call here. That's my argument, is that it seems reasonable for the signage to be near the top of a building like that, especially when they're not asking for more.
Mr. Chair, if I could just also tag on to Lee's response there. I'd say that I think the limitation on the signage heights, especially in corridors, is meant to reduce the amount of glare and noise and loudness along our corridors. I think that what's unique to this property and in this request is that it's set back, quite a bit from the main road, and it's accessed through a side street, and it's not directly accessed to Cerrillos. So I think, the unusual characteristic of the land is that it's set back a few hundred feet from the main corridor, and you want to be able to find this hotel. I think what changes the difference between this and, let's say, other variances for signs we've seen are that they're very visible from major corridors. They just wanted more. The request is not for more signs, and it's not for bigger signs. It's just for a sign that's higher. So I think that if you look at it in that perspective and it's set back a few hundred feet, I think that one could make a pretty strong argument that the unusual characteristic is it's a lower grade than the adjoining commercial. It's surrounded by commercial buildings that block its visibility, and that it's accessed off of Zaffarano and then subsequently through San Ignacio. So I think they're staying within most of the sign parameters. The only request is to have it at the top of the building.
I think it's 908 feet from Cerrillos, isn't it?
Yes.
All right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I just want to follow up with those comments. I don't necessarily disagree that the limitation is, I don't think that we should necessarily be granting variances just because maybe it didn't consider 40 feet high buildings. I think, looking at the building and the sign as two distinct things. Buildings can be 45. That doesn't mean that chapter 14 is setting that or forgot about that just because you can't see it, see a sign on a 40-foot building, that we should be, granting variances to allow signs on 40 feet buildings at the very top. The other thing that I would point out is, and what I'm concerned about is that this building and this property is offset from Cerrillos Road, I think over 900 feet. And that's not even accounting the offset for the building and how far back that's going to be. And my concern is that we're setting precedent for any commercial, any commercial property or commercial use that's 900 to 1,000 feet off Cerrillos. And if they're allotted to build for 40 feet high in the air, that they'll always be able to come back to the Planning Commission and state that just because if they don't have access to Cerrillos to put some other type of signage to direct them towards their business, which all signs rely on signs, not just hotels, that we're setting a precedent here that's going to increase the signscape in our communities, which I don't believe that Chapter 14 intended. The other thing that I would like to point out is that this building is unique, but it's the nature of the property, and we're trying to grant an exception just because it's 1,000 feet off of Cerrillos Road. My concern is that there is no public thoroughfare that actually grants direct access. The direct access and public thoroughfare is from a street that's not associated with Cerrillos Road. It's Zaffarano. So I'm concerned that if we actually approve this variance, we're going to create a precedent for any commercial development in the future that's 1,000 feet away from Cerrillos Road and is allowed to build 40 feet in the air, that we're going to start to create signage scapes throughout our communities, which I don't believe actually meets Chapter 14 in its intent. So with that, I have no other comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff, San Isidro Plaza was there any sign variances issued? And I hope I said it right, the movies and the Lowe's in that area.
Commissioner, I'll admit I didn't really look at that, but just looking, having been throughout the complex and looking at it, I don't believe there were, no.
Okay, and Mr. Logsdon, I'm confused, so if you'll clear it up for me. At this point, in your opinion, the sign would be blocked or as they build out? Because I think I heard you said as future development goes on, it would block the sign.
Well, this is just strictly my opinion, as you said, Commissioner, but I believe that as you travel Cerrillos, it is already blocked numerous times, and then you get some shots where you see it, and will likely continue to be that way. Even if any building that comes into the south of the hotel is lower, you have kind of the existing base situation where, it kind of gets blocked out here and there. That's a hard one to answer because it's just purely opinion and speculation on what might be there in front of it in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Logsdon. My opinion, Commission, is kind of in line with that of Commissioner Garcia's and Commissioner Seteña's. This isn't a project that's going up immediately on Cerrillos Road. I would like to just bring an example to anybody that's drove down Rodeo Road, up Rodeo Road, and they look and see what's going to be the Hampton Inn, and I would guess to say that the size of that Hampton Inn is probably going to be about the same size of this, and that building protrudes from the groundscape, where if there was a sign at 45 feet, that would be all you'd be able to see. So I don't think I can stand in with this sign variance. With that, I'll yield the floor, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any more on the sign variance, but I was going through my notes here a little bit, and there was a letter again that was submitted to the to staff today, and I think that Mr. Padilla tried to give a few points as to what was in that letter. Is that something that's allowable for me to ask right now, to see what major points were in that letter, or that can be presented?
I will yield to Sally on that as far as procedure. It did miss our deadline, which is, you know, at a public hearing with the public, like we used to do, people could walk up and distribute copies. We're obviously not in a situation like this, and we do have a 72-hour rule, and this thing literally came in at 4 o'clock today. I would ask Sally, you know, what our obligation is. Certainly, I'm not opposed to sending it on. I did email it to Jack just for good measures, so he'd see that this came up before the meeting. But I don't know what we do from here when you get something this night.
Sally?
Yeah, so since we've moved the meetings to the virtual environment, we are trying to really make sure that we're creating a lot of opportunities for public participation. But we also want to make sure that anything that actually ends up in the record is something that the commission can reasonably consider. And by distributing materials at the last possible second, it really precludes you all from being able to review it. So we did set a deadline of 72 hours in advance, and this was literally like 2. So the decision was made not to distribute it because we couldn't really include it in the record. I mean, I have it. I guess if the commission wanted it, we could read it in, but really we set those rules for a reason, and that was to kind of maintain order and make sure that the evidence that's in the record is really something that you can look at in advance. My understanding also is that I think Mr. Padilla really had been speaking with staff, so it's not a situation where it was somebody who maybe got late notice of the meeting or wasn't aware of our process or wasn't aware that we had this deadline. I think for that reason too, it's, you know, it's not really fair to be ambushing staff. It doesn't give staff time to respond to technical commentary, and it really doesn't give you all an opportunity to give it a good, meaningful review.
And Mr. Chair, can I also make a comment? We advertised as such that in our agenda and in our advertisements that we would not accept public comment after 72 hours or within 72 hours of a meeting for the purpose of distributing it, analyzing it. And we did communicate this with Mr. Padilla prior to this meeting, I think even within the last few weeks, about how the meeting was going to take place. And we did receive this letter at approximately 3:58 today. And it was not enough time, and we did set this rule and advertise it as such, so anybody else who had that same issue, we would have to be analyzing this as well. And I do believe the governing body even is doing the same for public hearings. And one other point of clarification, there was a development plan approved for San Isidro Plaza. There was a master sign plan in that. I don't know the specifics of it. It included a monument sign. There may have been some variances granted to signage in there. I don't have that in front of me, but I have reviewed sign requests for that subdivision of that development. So I just want to make that point of clarification.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Hold on. Go ahead, please.
I just want to say too, on the letter, I understand that the neighboring owners have issues and so forth, but when I look at the content of the letter and the main points of it, a lot of it has to do with a future road extension. And again, we're just not considering that here. And then part of it too, a lot of the points had to do with negotiating with Jim's group for water loops and stubs to the Garcia property. And again, those are issues between them. And this application has been kicking around for more than three months. It's been kicking around for like 5. And the Garcia group and the other owners have had a lot of months to negotiate with Jim. And I just don't see that the contents of that letter are germane tonight. It's just not.
Commissioner Garcia, is that the end of your inquiry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say on the record that I know in the past we have received communication kind of last minute and had the opportunity to review it. And in this case, again, I just want to make sure that if it is approved, it's not going to affect the well-beings of all the people around. There's a lot of traffic in that area, and I think there's a lot of future development to happen in that area as well. And to make it not only possibly a financial burden or destruction of their property for the future, that'll be something else that's not up to us to decide. However, going into understanding all the logistics of this whole proposed plan, would have liked to see those points. However, I do understand that it was late submission, and I'll stand the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Faulkner.
So getting back to the signage, if we were to grant the variance in the findings and facts, could we give an explanation as to why that we do not intend this to be a precedent that's set around the height of a building or a precedent that's set around the distance from a major corridor, but rather it's an issue of blockage of line of sight by other buildings? Is that something we could do? So if we did decide to grant the variance, it would be clear that we did not intend to set a precedent that was not something we all agreed to.
I'm afraid, speaking as the chair, that even if we said it's not going to be a precedent, it could be a precedent, but that's not the point. The point is, in the findings of fact and conclusions of law, we'll use that subsection A of the variance guidelines to show indeed that it's being granted, if it is granted by the commission, because of that blockage. That's the reason. And then I wouldn't even try to write something else in the findings and conclusions. Sally, what do you think?
Thank you, Chair Hyatt. I would agree with that assessment. If you'd like, I can read the finding number 23 that's provided in the draft findings. And of course, the commission can always amend these either at this meeting or at a subsequent meeting if you want to postpone the approval so we can redraft them. But if you want, I can read sort of that verbiage in that little subsection A that talks about this, why there's unusual physical circumstances that distinguish the land or structure. I think it does get to that point.
I think that's right. Is that it your question, Commissioner Faulkner?
Yes, that does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Clow? I'm sorry. Yeah, Commissioner Clow.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that I think the signage issue is not just a visual issue, but it's also a safety issue. I've been there before where you're trying to look for something and you can't find a sign showing where it is, and you're like a driving hazard. So I can just visualize people at night driving around trying to find this hotel, and if there's not a sign that they can look at and see, it's going to be driving hazards. And so I think I think that the safety issue outweighs the visual issue. And I'm also wondering, can we make a motion?
Hang on just 1 minute. I have some questions. Commissioner Sestania, I see your hand is raised. If you'll hang on for a minute. My question to Sally is that I'm concerned, and I'll express it publicly, that Ms. Burns and John Padilla and Jeff Branch all have fine reputations. I don't understand why these issues of private contractual relationship are coming to us so late. We thrive on trying to get to a decision, and we thrive on trying to get all of the information early on and to make decisions on that. And so my question to you more specifically is there anything that you heard during the public testimony that you would think is a matter for us to consider as a requirement of Chapter 14 in order to arrive at a decision on these two issues?
Thank you, Chair Hyatt, members of the commission. I don't think so, in my opinion. I have seen the 2009 contract that the parties are referencing, and it does speak about land dedication in the future and cooperation and payment and working out agreements in the future about the building out of the road. But I do agree with staff that in terms of the Chapter 14 requirements, what's happening here is consistent with the code, and that is what this commission has jurisdiction to determine. So I didn't hear anything new today. It's certainly something that we've been aware of for quite a long time. And they both have legal counsel. So I mean, it's certainly not the city's job to interpret the contract between the parties or to determine what those obligations are going forward. But in terms of, can they create the roads that are required by the code? Can they create the stub that's required for any potential connections? Are they able to build out the water and sewer infrastructure and ability for future connections? All of those requirements in staff's analysis has been met, with these concerns having been raised and us looking carefully at them. So I would agree with staff that the requirements of the code have been met, and that there's nothing that was raised tonight. To me, that's inconsistent with our legal obligation to enforce Chapter 14.
Thank you. Commissioner Satania.
Yeah, the only comment that I want to make in response to some of the comments that have been made is that it's the 21st century, and I don't know anyone that does not use their phone or have a smartphone that provides GPS to businesses in this day and age. And I think where we're coming from on this issue, which would potentially impact our skyscapes, which I believe is the intention of Chapter 14, so that we don't have lighted signage at 40 feet up in the air, is that most people use their phones. So I think continuing to try to use the argument that that you can't see a building and it impacts safety, or the business's ability for financial purposes, I don't know if those are good arguments. I would argue the intention of Chapter 14 is to protect our skyscapes from 40 feet backlit signage, even from hotels. That's all I got. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Chair, I don't know. I just want to volunteer that if any of the commissioners want to request to see the purpose and intent of the sign code, I could share my screen with that provision. I know it was kind of asked.
Any of the commissioners want to see that, please indicate by
I have it
raising
on
your
my
hand.
screen as well.
Dominic, is your hand raised? No.
It's raised.
Oh, you would like to see that?
Yeah, I think we saw in a couple sessions ago.
All right, Sally.
All righty.
Commissioner Clow, you need to raise your hand. Oh, yeah, sure, I can read that.
Can you not see it?
Sally, I think your screen is at a different ratio than ours. I can share my screen.
I could go to a smaller one. Does that help?
Mm.
No. You want to try yours? No, I do have a large screen.
There it goes. It's good right there.
Okay. I just can't go full screen.
And to respond specifically to Commissioner Satania, if I'm going to use GPS and find a route that way, I'm taking my grandkids. All right. Do you want to read through this by yourself, Commissioner Satania?
Could somebody read the portion that's relevant?
I'm sorry, I forgot.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I have my mic on, right?
Yep.
All right. So purpose and applicability, this is for 14-8.10 signs. So it says it's intended to establish a comprehensive and balanced system of sign control that accommodates the need for a well-maintained, safe, and attractive environment within the city, the need for effective communications, including business identification. It's the intent of this section to promote health, safety, general welfare, and aesthetics of the city by regulating signs that are intended to provide reasonable communication to the public and achieve the following specific purposes. A, to eliminate potential hazards to motorists and pedestrians using the public streets, sidewalks, and right-of-way. B, to safeguard and enhance private investment and property values. C, to control public nuisances. D, to protect government investments in public buildings, streets, sidewalks, traffic control, and utility devices, parks, and open spaces. E, to preserve and improve the appearance of the city through adherence to reasonable aesthetic principles in order to create an environment that is attractive to residents and to non-residents who come to live, visit, work, or trade. F, to eliminate excessive or confusing sign displays. And G, to encourage signs which by their design are integrated with and harmonious to the surrounding environment and the buildings and sites they occupy. So those are the sign code purposes.
Commissioner Satania, Commissioner Faulkner, anything else? All right, the chair recognizes Commissioner Clow.
I move the approval of the development plan for case number 2019-1325, subject to the conditions of approval and technical corrections recommended by staff.
Second, this is Commissioner Satania.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Would you poll the commission, please, Melissa?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Clow,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
I'm gonna say no.
Commissioner Gutierrez,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Satania.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion has been approved.
Thank you. Commissioner Clow, you're recognized again.
I move the approval of the variance, the sign variance for case number 2019-1326.
Commissioner Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I tend to side with Commissioner Santana on this issue that, we developed the sign codes for a reason. And I think, especially as we move towards more high density living, we want to keep those kind of nuisance signs down at the street level. People find their way by, looking to make it attractive to Cerrillos Road is unreasonable, and it's a bad reason to put a decision forward. So I'm not supporting the variance.
Well, then I assume you're not making a second to that motion. Is there a second to the motion? The chair will make a motion to second. Poll the commission, please, Melissa.
Commissioner Clow,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
No.
Commissioner Garcia,
No.
Commissioner Gutierrez,
No.
Commissioner Hogan,
No.
Commissioner Lawrence,
No.
Commissioner Satania.
No.
Mr. Chair, the motion has failed.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Commissioner Clow for a motion on the findings of fact and conclusions of law.
I move the approval of the findings of facts and conclusions of law as to the development plan, that portion. They might need to be amended.
Commissioner Faulkner, do you second?
Second.
All right. Sally, do we have some changes?
If I may chime in, I want to clarify that I think this motion could be acceptable, but we need to correct the typographic error in the beginning background section about the size of the hotel. So that was the numerical change that Mr. Logsdon mentioned at the beginning.
Let me take them one at a time. Commissioner Faulkner, is that acceptable to you?
Indeed.
Is it acceptable to you, Commissioner Clow?
Yes.
Go ahead. What's the next one?
The next one is that because we have explicitly labeled the two case numbers here as separate matters, I think we can just remove the variance case number 2019-1326 from this draft in its entirety. So that would strike findings 20 through 28, and it would strike conclusions 5 and 6. Those are all pertaining to the variance case. And we could just extract those. And we would also have to revise the wherefore at the bottom to remove the variance. But if you trust me to make those corrections, I think they're pretty cut and dry. And I think you can approve this motion if everyone's comfortable doing that.
Mr. Faulkner, is that acceptable to you?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Cloud.
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're voting on the amended findings, effect, and conclusions of law, taking out those references to the variance that was requested and denied. Melissa, will you poll the commission, please?
Yes.
I lost it, Melissa. Who?
Sorry, Commissioner Clow,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
So on the findings of fact, being that I voted no on the original motion, I think I have to say no on this because of criterion 2, where I felt like it does not, it will not adversely affect the public interest, and I thought it was a no. So
okay. Commissioner Gutierrez,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Satania.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion has been approved.
All right, the findings of fact and conclusions of law as amended are approved, and I'll be in to sign them when you notify me. Mr. Siebert, thank you on behalf.
Chair Hyatt.
Mr.
excuse
Chair.
me. Hey, Chair Hyatt.
Who's
Pardon
screaming?
me.
Who's
Sally.
screaming? Oh, okay,
The
go ahead.
Assistant City Attorney would like to request that we take another vote on the variance case and try to pass a motion. And maybe at this point, a motion to deny the variance.
I'm sorry.
And directing staff to draft findings and conclusions reflecting the commission's vote. And ideally, this motion would address the variance criteria in terms of which criteria were not met.
Okay, I see your point.
Mr. Chair, the person who makes this motion will have to state how each of the variance criteria was not met so that we can create findings of fact that show that this was a denied variance.
Oh, this sounds like a Mark or Dominic situation.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going back to case 2019-1326, which is the variance. Now, what the city attorney is trying to get us to do is, one of you who voted in the negative on that substantive motion should make a motion and specify the grounds which you thought are not met in this request from the applicant with an approval recommendation from the staff. So think about it. Let me see a hand raise. I'm sorry, Commissioner Lawrence, do you have a question, ma'am?
I am trying to make the motion, Mr. Chair.
All right, Commissioner Lawrence.
I would like to make a motion to deny the variance for case number 2019-1326 for the reasons that regarding criterion 1, that criterion requires something unusual about the land or structure to distinguish it from others in the vicinity. And in this case, it is surrounded by similar properties that are facing similar issues, and a variance would open up the possibility of similar variances for all of the surrounding similar properties. And in addition, regarding criterion 2, that the special circumstances make it infeasible for reasons other than financial cost to develop the property in compliance with the standards of Chapter 14. It is because, in this case, as has been decided by other commissioners, it is very possible nowadays to find properties, even if they are set back from the main street, and the reliance of high lit signs is much less relevant for the need to develop a property. And I believe that criterion 3 is fine and is met.
Is there a second to that motion?
Commissioner Faulkner seconds.
First of all, let me check with Sally. Is that enough? Yo, Sally.
You're funny.
Did that?
Here, I'm present. I want
Okay.
to note for the record that there are in fact 5 criteria for the variance. I think they need to meet all 5. So the Commissioner Lawrence's motion addressing 2 that have not been met is sufficient. If you agree with staff on the remaining 3, that's fine, but you didn't specifically address number 4 and number 5. So I just wanted to make sure we were going with staff on the remaining.
Honestly, I have lost criteria 4 and 5 at the moment. My main concerns were with criteria 1 and 2.
Thank you.
If you'd like, I can just know what they are, just in case you want to add any additional information to your motion.
I am fine. If anyone would like to make a friendly amendment, they can, but that's all I have to say for my motion.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a motion and a second to deny the variance request based on the reasons given by Commissioner Lawrence. Melissa, will you poll the commission, please?
Yes, Commissioner Clow. Commissioner Clow?
Go on.
No, no.
Oh, no, wait, Commissioner, this is a motion to deny.
This is a motion on the findings.
Variance. No, this
Variance.
this is back on the variance. This is a motion by one of the people in the majority and seconded by somebody in the majority to deny the variance and to issue the criteria, and as a part of the motion, to state the criteria upon which the variance is denied. So this is a motion to deny. So a vote to yes on this is denying the variance.
Yes, and I voted no, I don't agree.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Faulkner.
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia.
Yes.
Commissioner Gutierrez.
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Yes.
Commissioner Satenia.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion has been approved.
All right, now, Sally, I'm not sure I was listening to you, but tell me again, do we now need additional findings on this motion?
Chair Hyatt, commissioners, we'll have to draft findings that reflect the commission's decision and submit them for your approval at the next meeting.
All right, very well. Then we'll move on. Again, Mr. Siebert, thank you very much. Thank you for your hard work in bringing this to us. Thank you, everybody that testified. We appreciate it. If you could just leave your rooms quietly. No, I'm just kidding. All right. All right, we're going to move on. Case 2020-1773, 2845, our Freda development plan. Mr. Escabel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Am I able to share my screen, Noah?
Yes.
Okay.
And is our applicant present? I just want to confirm that our applicant's present before we start the hearing.
It's Jim Siebert again.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm assuming everybody can hear me. This is case number 2020-1773, 2845 Freda development plan. Jim C. and Associates Inc. agent for Philip Rue, owner. Request approval of a development plan to add 5,600 square feet of new construction in 2 phases. The property is approximately 0.87 acres, is zoned C2 PUD within the West Santa Fe River Corridor overlay and within the Rivers and Trails Archaeological Review District. Let's see if I can get my cursor here. The Land Use Department recommends approval subject to conditions listed in section 2 and technical corrections, which are in your packet. This motion will be required to have 2 motions for the one for the findings and one for the development plan. The applicant has complied with the development plan approval criteria of 1438D1. Criteria 1, that is the Planning Commission is empowered to act on development plans. The applicant approving the development plan will not adversely affect the public interest, and that the uses and associated buildings are compatible with and adaptable to building structures and uses of the abutting property and other properties in the vicinity. Again, all these are in your memo. There was an early neighborhood notification done January 9th. There were no members of the public that attend. Well, actually, no, there were 2 members of the public, but they were both in support of the application. This application, if not acted on within 3 years, will expire May 7th, 2023. The figure on the left, the existing, shows the buildings that will be removed in favor of the proposed. The first phase is highlighted in green. The second phase is highlighted in yellow. And with that, I'll answer any questions you may have. And let me know if I need to take my screen down.
No, why don't you leave it up for a while? Thank you, Mr. Esquivel. Mr. Siebert.
Good evening, everyone. This is Victoria Dalton.
Hi, Victoria.
Do I need to be sworn in?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your full name and address for the record.
Victoria Dalton, 915 Mercer Street.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Go ahead, Victoria.
Okay, so this property is located on Agua Fria. It's on the east side if you're traveling southbound. It's directly across from Piccolino's and the Brewer Station, and there's 3 properties that adjoin this one to the west that are C2 PUD. The applicant currently has his plumbing business on these 2 structures, and an engineer, Hans Engineering, currently leases this building. What the applicant wants to do at this point, and he is running his plumbing business there, is to have a new office. In order for him to construct a new office, he has to have development plan approval. Since he has to have development plan approval just for a new office, he decided maybe sometime in the future, and this would be phase 2, that he would like to have the ability to have another office use. So we have proposed that as a second phase, so we don't have to come back to the commission for another development plan or development plan amendment. With that, I stand for questions, and we're in agreement with staff conditions.
Mr. Esquivel.
Yeah, I'd like to add that the reason that you're seeing such a small development plan before you is because of the PUD. This technically, had it not been for the annexation and bringing it in and slapping that PUD on it, would have actually been a building permit, and you would not have seen it. These are less than 10,000 square feet within 200 feet of any residential district. So it didn't qualify for a building permit. The only reason was it's part of a PUD. So that's why it's such a small project, and it's before this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Esquivel. Victoria, if you'll wait for just a second, we're going to open this for public hearing. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to testify? I don't have my, where's my
Jack, can we move that video?
Yeah, you better take it down now, please, Dan. And I want to see the attendees. Anybody from the attendees wanting?
Chair Hyatt, I see that.
I see Rick Martinez.
Yes.
All right. Is that the only person that wants to be recognized, Rick? Okay. Rick, please be sworn.
Mr. Martinez, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your full name and address for the record.
Rick Martinez, 725 Garcia Road.
The floor is yours, Rick.
All right, I just wanted to support this as a member of the West River Corridor Coalition. I just like to say that it was this is a good way to start this process of seeing development along Alfredo Street, and I think this is a good way to do it. I just like to say that as long as we get people that are willing to support the corridor, I think it's great. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Noah, is there anybody else that wants to be recognized?
Mr. Chair, I don't see any members of the public. There is a phone-in member of the public. And if this member of the public would like to speak, please press *9. I do not see a *9 being pressed and no hands are raised.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this will close the public hearing. We'll open it for questions from the commissioners. Commissioner Satania.
Jack, if it's all right, I would like to go ahead and make a motion.
Please do. I see no other hands raised. Go ahead.
I move that we approve the development plan for case number 2020-1773, subject to conditions of approval and technical corrections recommended by staff. And I would also like to include in my motion, I move that we also approve the findings of facts of conclusion of law for case 2020-1773 as presented in Exhibit B.
Commissioner Faulkner seconds.
I see Commissioner Garcia's hand raised. Is that correct? Unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry about that. No, I was going to second, but it's okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Commissioner Hogan, do you wish to be recognized, sir?
I do. I just wanted to make the observation that the not only the Agua Fria end of this property, it's moved forward on, but the other end is backs onto the renovated section of the Santa Fe River. And I hope as the owners, they're contemplating the future, look for ways to integrate with some of the activities and the views and things along that portion of the river. That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner. Melissa, will you poll the commission, please? I'm sorry. First of all, Sally, do we have any problem putting the findings with the substantive motion?
In my view, the motion's sufficiently clear. If the motion for some reason doesn't pass, we may need to decouple the two, but I don't have a problem with it.
Very well. Melissa, poll the commission, please.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Clow.
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner.
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia.
Yes.
Commissioner Gutierrez.
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Yes.
Commissioner Satenia.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion has been approved.
All right, and we'll reflect that that's both the motion for the development plan as well as the findings and conclusions. Thank you, Victoria. Well done. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now we're moving to the last case, case 2020-1778, the Vista Del Rio preliminary subdivision. And before we hear from Mr. Escobar, let me just check the attendees and make sure Ms. Jenkins is here. Yeah, there she is. Okay. All right, Mr. Escobar. Are you there, Dan?
Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Is everybody see that on the screen?
Yes, sir.
And it's a little off center. I don't know if everyone can see the full page. I'm missing the right-hand side of the page.
I don't know.
I think I just see one page.
I see one page.
Okay, it's probably just the way mine shows. Apologies, Mr. Escobar.
All right.
This is case number 2020-1778, Vista Del Rio preliminary subdivision, Jenkins Gavin Inc., agent for Molenbeek Professional Association Retirement Trust and Twilight Homes. Owners request approval of a preliminary subdivision plat for 21 single-family lots located at 5401 Agua Fria Street. The property is approximately 4.02 acres. The Land Use Department is recommending approval of the preliminary subdivision plat, subject to the recommendations, conditions of approval that are also listed in your packet in Exhibit A. This will take two motions: approval, deny a preliminary plat, subject to conditions of approval of technical corrections recommended by staff, and approval, deny the findings of facts and conclusions of law for case 2017-78. This application does meet all of the approval criteria for subsection 1437C1 for preliminary plat. All 5 of these have been addressed by the applicant. There was an early neighborhood notification on December 17th. The applicant and staff were in attendance, and there were no members that attended for this application. This does have an expiration of 3 years if the applicant does not act on it within that time frame, which will expire on May 2023. The applicant has agreed to all of the conditions. I will have to add another one, probably on the technical corrections in Exhibit A, because I do note that the parking was not put into the subdivision to show the indents along the curb lines. Aside from that, I think I did make an error on the open space on one of these things. It's not 3 acres, but The applicant is here and she'll be able to explain more on it. With that, I'll stand for questions. Or
Thank you, Mr. Esquivel. Ms. Jenkins?
do you want me to take down my slide?
No, not yet. Let's just see if she needs it. Well,
I'm sure she has her own presentation.
yeah, probably. Go ahead. Ms. Jenkins, are you there? Have you undone her mute?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it appears it's her audio.
Ms. Jenkins, continue. There you are. We can see you.
Is that better?
Yes, but your audio is weak.
Okay, let me see. I'm not quite sure how to turn up my volume.
You can go to the settings function and then you can click your audio and visual and you can increase your microphone volume.
I see your lips moving, but I can't hear anything.
Okay, my apologies. So Noah, where are the settings?
If
I
you're
don't see a
using,
settings button on my side.
if you're using the Zoom app, go to the main app and then click the little thing that says settings and then click on audio.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Mr. Chair, Noah, if need be, she can always call in and use her phone.
We can hear you, Jennifer. And the other place that I'm able to adjust mine is when you're in the big Zoom screen and you have the little mute microphone in the lower left hand, and there's a little up caret just to the right of the mute. If you click on that, it has an option for audio settings, which again has a microphone output level, I guess is what speaker output. You can slide a little slider for output level to make it higher.
Here we go. Here we
Yeah.
go.
All right. If not,
It's up all the way.
All right.
That's better, Jennifer. Thank you.
I have
It is better, and we'll live with it, Jennifer. So go for it.
Apparently,
Please.
I need to upgrade my microphone.
Apparently so. Melissa, will you swear the witness, please?
Yes. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your full name and address for the record.
Jennifer Jenkins, 130 Grant Avenue, Santa Fe, 87501.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a brief presentation. Let me just pull that up really quick, and I will share my screen.
I turned up my volume. That seems to help, but when anybody else talks, it's going to sound like.
Are you seeing my screen?
Oh, that was better. That's a lot better. Okay.
Are you seeing my screen?
I see you, but I don't see your screen.
Okay. There, hold on. How's that?
Better, much better. We see your, yeah, there you go.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I'm here on behalf of the Mullenbeck family and Twilight Homes in request for preliminary subdivision plat approval for a 21 lot subdivision located at the corner of Agua Fria and Cottonwood. This is the subject property here. The subject property is currently a little over 4 acres, and there is going to be an existing transaction that is pending for the dedication of some public right-of-way in this area of the property to accommodate the new roundabout that the city is constructing in this location. And so this site is going to be reduced down to about 3.5 acres. So we have designed a subdivision on 3.5 acres, assuming that that right-of-way has been dedicated. And this to the right here is the Paseo del Rio subdivision that was approved a couple of years ago, and that is currently under construction. And this is the Fairway Village neighborhood across the street. And this is the Santa Fe River.
You've got water showing in that. What's the plan here?
The city's GIS does that on purpose.
Oh, okay.
Wishful thinking, I think. So this is the zoning map. So the property, all the purple here is mixed use zoning. So we are developing in accordance with the MU zoning. Residential projects are a permissible use in the MU district. And this just shows the existing conditions. There is some floodplain along the river, but none of the floodplain actually crosses the subject property. As you can see through the contours here, it is relatively flat with no significant terrain issues. So this is the proposed site plan. Our access is going to be directly from Agua Fria. We work very closely with John Romero to determine what is the best way to access this site. It was determined that for a variety of reasons, which we can discuss if desired, it didn't make sense to access Cottonwood because we, as you can see, we have a really small amount of frontage on Cottonwood, and any driveway we would try to punch through here is really going to conflict with the new roundabout. So it made more sense for us to have access directly from Agua Fria. So you come in on Agua Fria, and then there's a short little dead end here going off to the west. And then we come down here to a cul-de-sac and then another little dead end drive to access these lots down at the sort of narrow portion of the site. As I mentioned, there are 21 single family detached. These are detached single family homes. There will be 4 affordable homes in accordance with the Santa Fe Homes program. We have some pockets of open space here as well as here. And we also, we are connecting to the Santa Fe River Trail project that is actually being constructed by Santa Fe County. So the property here to the north and to the west is all owned by Santa Fe County as part of the River Trail corridor. And so we are constructing a trail that moves through this piece of open space to connect to the trail. And we're also connecting to it over here. So this is really the trailhead sort of parking area, but there is a pathway here that leads out to the trail. So we have an opportunity to connect to that pathway right here. One of the changes that you might have noticed in the staff report, Dan and I talked about it. We're showing a couple of like guest parking spaces here at the end of this dead end. And I kind of agreed with Dan that I think that this theoretically could create conflicts for this lot number 14 and their access to their driveway. You know, if somebody with a huge truck parked there or something, it could create issues. So we're going to eliminate those parking spaces, and we're actually going to move them right over here. So we have some nice on-street guest parking. So that was one of the conditions of approval, and we will incorporate that change when we submit the final plat application.
I hate to interrupt, Jennifer, but while you're in between slides, were you ultimately sworn in? I think because of our, okay, yeah, I'm so sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
Thank you. My apologies.
That's okay. So this just is sort of a zoom out that just kind of shows the context of the site plan relative to its surroundings. And then this is the landscape plan. So of course, you know, street trees, and we will be, we'll have some, you know, landscaping in here, and there is a drainage pond here that will also be landscaped, and we'll be doing some street trees along Agua Fria here as well. And then this actually is the current state of the plan for the trail along the Santa Fe River. That is that Santa Fe County project. So you can see the trail right here. So we're going to be connecting to it around this location. And then you can see the little trailhead, and this is that path I mentioned that leads out to the trail itself. So we are connecting here as well. So we're really thrilled to have these opportunities for these types of connections, because it's a great amenity for this neighborhood as well as, you know, just the community at large. And then there's the subdivision plat that just shows all of the detailed information on lot dimensions. And you can see, as I mentioned, we have the Paseo del Rio project that is under construction here on the other side of Cottonwood. So that concludes my presentation. I would be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the time for a public hearing. Is there anybody from the public that would like to be heard in this matter? Please raise your hand as a attendee and you'll be recognized. Or if you're the person who's on the telephone, hit *9 so that you can raise your hand. Mr. Burke, are there any hands that are raised?
Mr. Chair, it doesn't appear that anybody is raising their hand.
All right. Well, then I'll close the public hearing and open it to commissioners for questions. Can you, Jennifer, please take down the schematic that you have so I can see the rest of the agenda? Okay. All right. Commissioner Lawrence.
Yes, either from Ms. Jenkins or Dan, I just want some clarification on what the required open space is and how much is being provided. I know that there are differences here. And I know, Dan, you said there was an error in what was being provided, but I'm also curious about what the requirement is, because I think there's also a difference there between your report and the presentation.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Lawrence, yeah, there's about 6,000 square feet of open space that's being presented there, actually right on par with what's required, if not a little over. I just failed to put that into the memo.
So that's approximately what is being required, that 6,700 square feet.
Right, what's on the plat is good for the subdivision as they presented it.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Garcia.
I just have a question in regards to the trash collection for that site. I mean, it looks pretty tight getting in there with those big city trucks. And is that something that's going to be feasible for them to do, or how that's going to be handled?
These streets are designed in accordance with city standards, and they will be dedicated as public streets, and they will accommodate trash pickup there. They accommodate a fire truck. So if you accommodate a fire truck, you accommodate you can accommodate trash pickup. So this is very traditionally designed, and so we are not anticipating any issues.
Commissioner Garcia, you still have the floor. Your mic is off, sir. I can't hear you.
Is it on now?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Somebody unmuted me, or somebody muted me. Anyway, so traditionally when you have a street such as this and you have people parking in the areas, which they will probably park in undesignated areas in this place, those big trash trucks and fire engines, I don't know, they would have an issue getting in and out. But just a point to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Satania. Can you unmute Commissioner Satania, please?
Yes.
I said, sorry, Chair Hyatt, would you entertain a motion?
Seeing no other hands raised, I think a motion would be appropriate, Commissioner.
I'm going to go ahead and just move one of these first, because I'm not sure if there needs to be changes with the facts and findings and conclusions of law. So I move to approve the preliminary subdivision plat subject to conditions of approval and technical corrections recommended by staff for case 2020-1778, the Vista del Rio preliminary subdivision.
Commissioner Faulkner seconds.
Sally, I heard Dan make a couple of changes. Are those sufficient that we have them on the record, that we don't need to itemize those?
On this particular motion, I think we're just looking at the approval of the plat, but I think that they're adequately on the record. I expect that Mr. Escobar would be updating the staff technical corrections and conditions of approval in the city's records to reflect these changes, and the minutes will reflect it. So
thank you. Melissa, will you poll the commission, please?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Clow.
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner.
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia.
Yes.
Commissioner Gutierrez. Commissioner Gutierrez?
It looks like we may have lost Commissioner Gutierrez.
Okay, let's go on.
Okay, Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Satenia.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion has been approved.
All right, let's go back and check. Commissioner Gutierrez, are you with us still? I don't have him on mine. Does anybody else have him still listed as a panelist?
No, Mr. Chair, it looks like he was having some technical difficulties with his connection earlier.
All right. All right. The motion passes. Commissioner Satania for the findings.
I move to approve the findings of facts and conclusions of law for case 2020-1778 as shown in Exhibit B.
Commissioner Faulkner seconds.
Been moved and seconded. Would you please poll the commission?
Yes, Commissioner Clow,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Satenia.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion has been approved.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Congratulations.
Everybody,
All right.
you guys are doing a great job.
Oh, thank you. We're going to ask to have our pay increased soon.
Good. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're on staff communications. Noah, do we have any staff communications?
Mr. Chair, we don't have any communications. Just want to thank the commission for all the hard work we've been doing, and you guys have been doing, and making these adjustments and being willing to participate in practice Zooms and all my different instructions I've sent out to y'all and backgrounds and stuff. And thank you, Dan, for making this background for everybody. So I think this is really successful. And we get to repeat it again in like 2 weeks on May 21st with probably a lot more attendees. So, but with only one case. So, or 2 case captions, but really 1 case. So that'll be our next Zoom meeting. And if everybody can plan to be there at 5:30.
Okay, from my point of view, first of all, Dan, I really appreciate it. Are you still there, Dan? Hey, Dan.
Commissioner, yes.
Okay, good. I really appreciated the way you went through your report and highlighted where you were talking about. That was helpful. I also appreciate the fact that in your staff report, you say that the commission must approve or deny. And I would encourage Noah to have all of the staff reports say approve or deny. If it just says approve, then it intimates, at least perhaps to some people who might think negatively of us, that we're going to approve everything that the staff puts in there, but that isn't obviously the case. So I would like to encourage you to put approve or deny. I thought both the reports are good. I actually like shorter reports, frankly, because if we have read the report, or as I say, the paper report, which I really appreciate, I know a lot of that stuff and I appreciate it. Thank you. No, I thanked you on Monday. I'll thank you again for all that good work that you've done. And Commissioner Satania, I really want you to know that for people over 70, we really don't use the computer that well. And I admire what all of you young folk do, but that doesn't work for me. And I'm hoping that my life is going to be over a lot sooner than I have to learn a lot more. So I appreciate what I've done in this because I'm really having to step up to the plate, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. Staff communications, anything else, Noah?
No, that's it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the DRT members who attended this meeting.
Yes, thank you to everybody who attended. Comments from the commissioners. Does anybody want to comment about the pluses or the minuses of this type of hearing? I thought it went well. I thought that was controversial in the first case, and I hope we handled it well. Does anybody want to criticize or raise points?
Looks like we have some hands raised.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Commissioner Faulkner.
Yeah, I want to thank staff, Dan and Noah. You guys, I think as much support as I needed, if you gave all the other commissioners that much attention, you guys should get an award of some kind. You guys, this was a difficult situation, and I really think you did an awesome job getting us all ready for it and making sure we all had technology and in running the running the Zoom meetings. Jack, I think you did an awesome job, and staff did as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Satania.
Chair Hyatt, I just want to thank you for your comments and the reminder. The reminder that I'm
what the hell, are you 22 or what?
I'm the young person in the room, and it's definitely arrogant of me to assume that everyone has a smartphone and uses that technology. So I will definitely keep that in mind for the future, and I appreciate you calling me out.
Listen, my smartphone is a lot smarter than I am, I guarantee. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to also, well, first off on that note, I know that a lot of the old timers, you'll catch them looking at their phones like this, just like the youngsters. On another note, I'd like to commend the Noah and Dan and everybody, Lee, everybody who's worked on this platform. It seemed like it worked pretty well. I hope that everybody that wants to either view or attend or be a part of this meeting, being that it is a public hearing, has the ability to. I know that I started out with a laptop and my speaker was going haywire, and at the last minute, thankfully I brought my work laptop, and that's what I'm using right now. So, you know, I think technology sometimes can hinder people from being able to attend and be part of this process. But I think it went very well for us, and my hat's off to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Clow.
Yes, I wanted to say that I think it's helpful having the paper materials in terms of it making easier to maneuver. So I would like to encourage that in the future. I think everyone got them. I don't know if everyone wants them going forward, but you know, I found this to be relatively easy.
Okay. You're saying you want a binder? You want a binder before?
No, just having the paper. I think that Noah, I think, delivered paper materials to everyone because he didn't want us fumbling with computers and stuff while we're learning this. And
Oh,
I think
I was the only one. I thought I was the only one that got the paper.
No, I got paper. I think he.
Oh, okay.
Noah was. I thought Noah said he was going to give them to everybody, but it was just made it much easier for me to have.
Well, that makes me feel a lot better. All right. Couple things I want to ask you about, commissioners, and first of all, next meeting I have a conflict, so Commissioner Hogan is going to chair the meeting. And is there anybody that cannot attend May 21st? Because I don't want to get close to a quorum issue. Okay, good.
Commissioner Satania Commissioner Satania has his hand up.
I'm sorry, Dominic?
Yeah, no, first, I just wanted to thank Commissioner Lawrence for taking the criteria for that variance and picking that up. So I just want to thank, and then in response to Commissioner Clout, this issue for the paper copies has come up a couple of times in the past. I'm still a request, if possible, to get both, but to try to save paper, get the 8.5 by 11s in a digital format, and any plans that are provided to us to still be delivered, if that's a possibility.
Okay, well, I'll let Noah and Eli work on that and see if they can come up with something. I think that's reasonable. You know, the 8.5 by 11, it's easy to get up on the screen. It's easy to read. I think that's different than trying. I don't know how you fold out those big plats, but okay, thank you. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is the format of the public hearings. I really want to find out if you think it's helpful as commissioners to have the opportunity to ask questions and interact with those people that testify. And the reason that I bring that up is that it seems to me that several times commissioners have tried to do that, and I've been somewhat reluctant because of what I've seen in the past, but I'm not sure. And I talked to Sally earlier today, and I said, I kind of think we need to open this up. So I'm inclined to let us have a bit of interaction with members of the public when they're testifying to see if we understand their questions or their concerns correctly. And I just want to know if there's anybody that objects to that. No?
I think it's a good idea, Jack.
Okay, Commissioner Faulkner, you're talking and you have your hand up. You want more?
No, I think it's a good idea. I think it helps me to be able to interact at the time an issue comes up. Some of these things get really complicated and I try to take notes, but sometimes it slips out of my mind. And so being able to ask the question at the time or to have an interaction is super helpful.
Well, I think that you've probably noticed that as the chair, I've been taking notes too, and that I like to be able to go back after the public hearing's closed and ask everybody on staff or the applicants on each of the issues that I think are relevant. I mean, if somebody's way off the charts, I don't think so, but to ask them so that they know that we are taking all of their issues seriously. But I'm not sure I pick up on all of those. And I know a couple of times Brian and I think Dominic and Lee have all asked questions of folks that I may have missed. So I'll continue to do that. It does make the meeting a bit longer. It could become tedious too, because then the public hearing could go on forever.
And Mr. Chair, I just wanted to acknowledge that the phone number that I allowed to talk, who's as an attendee, is actually Commissioner Gutierrez, and he's here. For some reason there was an issue with the connection.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Gutierrez, we took the vote without you, sir.
Can you go back and redo it?
Or we could, I suppose, but no.
No, I'm just kidding.
Good, because I was going to tell you you're full of it. No, we're not doing that.
I'm gonna need a motion to reconsider.
No, I think he's fine. It passed unanimously, and so the next meeting. Is there more than one case, Noah, for next meeting?
There's two case captions. One is an ordinance amendment, which you'll be the recommending, and the other one is approval of a development plan.
Same property.
Same property, same case.
Okay.
Numbers, but yeah.
I believe this is going to be controversial.
I think there were some members in attendance tonight who are part of that neighborhood who wanted to see how this format is going to work so that they can attend.
Okay. So, Mark, I think it's up to you how you want to run the meeting, but this whole business about letting them speak when the public speaks, I think is important, and I'll leave it up to you. I wish you good luck.
Thanks a lot. I was hoping there might be, I know one of the things with this format, when their time is up, you can just mute them and cut them off. That may be a little harsh, but I guess we could say that, if you go over, I liked your deal, they'll let you finish the sentence, but not a paragraph.
Yeah.
And so I think if we have that rule kind of in place, and then if they're going on beyond that, then we just mute them. And I don't know whether or not, you do that, or is that coming from Noah or one of the staff people?
Let's throw Noah under the bus and have Noah cut him off.
Arbitrarily, you're done.
Host is able to do that. And another thing, Vice Chair Hogan, just to mention it, is that you, as the chair at the next meeting, do have the discretion to set the amount of time that you want to limit it to. I know that for the H board, we'll often do 2 minutes, or if there's a really large volume of interested people, we can go with a shorter period of time. So feel free to just let us know your wishes on that. And if you want the host and or co-host to cut people off after if they go over by a certain amount or something, I mean, those rules are within the discretion of the chair. So.
And just so you know,
we can't really do that technique of being able to pool time, so that won't really be an option using this format. So I think we'll just have to be a little bit more and I think really 2 minutes is probably, if we got a lot of people, 2 minutes is adequate to get your point across. The other thing I was going to say is that there's a better way that we can handle minor votes rather than do the roll call. It seems like that would really save some time in the meeting. And I don't know if procedurally, if we could just say, I'll give first anybody that's not in favor express themselves, and otherwise, I don't know if there's a default way of doing it rather than having, not having to poll everybody.
We have to do the roll call.
Yeah, the reason we've adopted that is that when all of this started happening, public health emergency, the Attorney General issued some written guidance about the Open Meetings Act and conducting meetings virtually, and did expressly state that roll call votes should be taken for all votes if you're doing a virtual meeting like this. I think you could argue that if it's incredibly clear that it was unanimous and you know who's there, that's I don't know. I think the safest course of action is to continue with the cumbersome procedure of the roll call vote. So that's the sort of procedure we've adopted.
And Chair Hyatt, we will have revised findings for the variance by the next meeting. So if you do want to partake in that part of the meeting for adoption of those findings of facts, we'll have those revised for the next meeting. Or actually,
I don't think that's necessary because you're going to vote on them, and it was there was one dissenting vote, I think. I don't think that's necessary.
Okay.
All right. Jesse, did you want to say anything else?
I was just going to go back and add back in to when we were talking about the public comment portion. And I think probably the people who were listening and who heard the discussion about getting comments in advance, that's going to really help. The timer is going to help. And I'd also suggest that maybe we try to keep it as commissioners a policy to make sure that they're clarifying questions that we're asking, and don't allow ourselves to get off track during that public comment, and save that for after the hearing's closed. Those were just a couple of thoughts that I had about how to make it go as smoothly as possible.
Thank you. That's helpful. Well, all in all, I thought it went pretty well. I mean, we knew that first case was going to be controversial, and we heard it out. And, I can't, oh well, I don't want to go on, I mean, I can't believe I got ex-partied 4 hours before the meeting, Anything else?
I think we just need to be careful, like if we do cut people off on our end, we need to let them know at the beginning of the meeting what the rules are, so that we're not ambushing them with something they're not accustomed to. And so I think anything we can do legally that will make the meeting go smoothly is a good idea, but I think it'd be good if Mark could run through what his rules are for the public comment section, so that then it's clear, like at the beginning of the meeting, everyone knows what the rules are, and then people can't say they were surprised by being cut off.
No, if you would share that same cheat sheet with Mark as soon as you can, that would be helpful.
Yep, he's got it.
Okay.
Already.
All right. The cheat sheet. Sit down and be quiet. No. All right. Hearing nothing else, I'll consider the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks,
guys. Good job, Jack.
Thank you.